Take care.
So if we use things like positive reinforcement and we're using treats and we're sympathetic to our dog's needs and we're watching their body language, are we spoiling them? And look, people do worry about this. So we're going to go into this a bit in this presentation. So our dogs have been bred for thousands of years, and again this is debated, but let's say somewhere around 5,000 years we've been breeding dogs to have for reasons. So they actually had jobs, they had a purpose. And the pet dog is really a very new concept. So if I had, say, this Kelpie here, there may be thousands of years worth of breeding in this dog to actually get a dog that's really good at working sheep, fairly fearless, who can go over the top of the sheep and move them along, and he's vigilantly watching everything they do and he can follow instructions. This didn't happen by accident. So we took the pet dogs that were really good at this and we bred them to other dogs that were really good at this. If this Kelpie's ancestors howled at the moon and circled all night and, I don't know, chewed holes in their tail, as long as they didn't die, if they were still the very best sheep moving dog, they were probably going to be bred. So those genes kept going. So about, say, apparently it was about 1920s, people started having dogs as pets as such. But even then, it would be odd to have a dog that had really no reason at all. So you might have a dog because you live on a farm and it might be a little terrier and it kills rats. Or you might have a guard dog because it guards your property and saves your property. So these dogs actually had jobs, they had purpose. Somewhere, well, I grew up, I was born in the 70s, but as I grew up in the 80s. In the 80s in Sydney, it was not unusual that dogs were let out of the garden in the morning and they actually roamed the street. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing. They ate out of garbage bins, they had friends, a lot of them weren't necessarily desexed. So they had a degree of autonomy because they could move around, do their own thing. They decided when they slept and when they ate and what they did and who they hung around with. So somewhere around the 90s, we became, in Sydney anyway, more safe with our animals, and this became something where, they stayed in your yard. Being pets where they're in the house a lot is really fairly new. So this pet dog concept is new. So we might have a dog like this that's a Kelpie. Its ancestors not very long ago were actually working dogs, and now they're pets, and they're expected to be in the house and they're expected to be quiet, even though they're dogs. They might be dressed up, they might have children around, and they're not expected to nip at them and move them along. So this is a new concept, and we have to be sympathetic to our dogs because they're not necessarily coping with the changes we're making in their environment, and that's our choice. Okay, so I'm a human. I know how to live in a human house. So I could move into any of your houses, and I know that if I need to do a wee, I do it in the toilet. If you use up the last of the toilet roll, I put a new toilet roll on. I know that I wash up my dishes. I get the basic concepts of living in a house. Unless I went to a country that had incredibly different customs and traditions, I would pretty much get it right. And even then, I think we all have very similar, as human, similar habits, more or less. So dogs do not. Dogs are dogs. Dogs actually need to live as part of our house. So it's not us going and learning how to fit in with them. They're having to learn constantly how they fit in with us. So as a dog living in a human house, we have two ways you might find that there's learning. So there's trial and error learning and there's errorless learning. So most of the time there's trial and error learning, and that's quite frustrating. So if you came home from work with the shopping and your dog is sitting beautifully, just waiting for you to get home, you might walk straight past them. Don't pay them any attention because they've been good. Versus if the same dog jumped up on you and then the shopping's gone flying and your backpack with your computer's gone, you might be yelling, you might, oh my God, dog, you're the worst, and rah, rah, rah. That dog's now got attention for jumping up on you. So sitting nicely, no attention. Jumping up on your owner, big attention. So the dog goes, oh, know exactly how to get that attention. Best way to get the attention, jump up on my owner when they've got their hands full. And because that's the behavior that was reinforced, that'll be the behavior that's seen again. So a lot of the time our dogs are in the house and they're like, does this work? No. Does this work? No attention. Does this work? No reinforcement. Does this work? So all those things that get no reinforcement, they're not going to repeat. Repeated behavior that is reinforced will be repeated. So that's really important. Now, the other way we could set this up is errorless learning. So errorless learning is where we set the scene for success. So you might have someone with a lead on the dog. When you get home, they ask the dog to sit. You walk in, good boy, you mark the behavior and give them a reinforcement. So you've actually set that dog to be successful because they didn't get the chance to jump on you, and you've reinforced the not jumping, the sitting nicely. So we need to look at whether we're doing trial and error learning or errorless learning. Now, as a human, my example for this would be I worked in a vet clinic once where my first day on the job, the practice manager said, I hate new people and I'm not going to show you where anything is. So trial and error learning, I had to open all the drawers, open all the cupboards, muddle my way on the computer. And quite honestly, it was a really horrible day. It's very frustrating. It's hard. You put in a lot of effort for very little reinforcement. Versus errorless learning would have been if the same person had said to me, here's the 5 things you need to learn on the computer, need to know on this computer, and this is how you do them. Here's your necessities. Hey, other stuff, come and ask me. That would be errorless learning. I would have had a much better day, would have had a much better time. And look, if we are constantly in a state of trial and error learning, it's really exhausting. It doesn't make you feel very good. So we need to really look at how we're reinforcing our puppies and our dogs and set them up to be successful. So one way we can do errorless learning is we can use our antecedent arrangement to set the scene for success. So like we said before, the other dog might wear a lead when we come in, a collar and a lead. We might not put our dogs in a situation where, say, they have access to the side passage and they're going to bark at the neighbour. So we need to look at what can we control so that the behaviour doesn't actually, the undesirable behaviour doesn't get triggered. And at the same time, what can we control so the desirable behaviour does happen and we can actually reinforce that so it continues to happen. And reinforcement, as we said before, reinforcement, behaviours that are reinforced will be repeated. So reinforcement creates a clear message to our dogs that is the correct behaviour. So if your dog is sitting nicely, reinforce that behaviour. If they're not barking, we're going to reinforce that behaviour. If they manage to walk past the cat without, rather than chasing a cat, we want to reinforce that behaviour. All too often, what we do is ignore good behaviour and we actually punish bad behaviour. So we want to turn this around. When our dogs behave poorly, so things like barking, lunging, snapping, growling, they're coming from a place of high arousal. Their brain actually perceives a danger, and then their brain has sent messages to the adrenal glands. So you've got cortisol and you've got adrenaline and you've got noradrenaline, and they're actually in a state where fight, flight, fidget, freeze are activated. These dogs are in emergency mode. They are not coming from an area where their prefrontal cortex of their brain is going, oh, I wonder if this is a good decision. Perhaps it's dangerous, perhaps it's not. So these dogs are what we call in the red zone, and they're reacting. They're not thinking. So when we offer a nice, calm, safe alternative from our dogs when they're reacting, you're not going to reinforce the poor behavior. You are keeping them safe. We are actually a really good model for calm behavior. So, human example of this. If I have had a horrible day at work and my partner makes me a nice dinner and a glass of wine, I don't aim to have a more horrible day tomorrow. It just means that I do trust that my partner has my back. And in a similar way, if our dog, say, reacted to another dog by barking, lunging, growling, and I walk my dog away nice and calmly and we go home, my dog doesn't go, yes, that gets me attention. They just know that I actually know that that other dog is terrifying to them, and we're going to get some distance. So I'm going to keep my dog safe. Kim Brophy talks about the hack. There's a hack where basically you tell your dog, I've got this. You don't need to worry. I'm in charge. I've got this. And that's what we're doing. So in summary, creating a safe, predictable environment where your dog has choices and they're understood creates trust. There are going to be times where you make mistakes. There's going to be times where you need to do something for your dog that they don't like. Elfie, the other day, my little terrier, broke one of her toenails, and I've had to pull that off. 100% that hurt, and it was a horrible thing to do. But if 99% of her interactions with me are positive and she feels understood and has choices, then that 1% of time where I have to do something horrible, I'm going to be forgiven. So Susan Freeman looks at it like a trust piggy bank. We need to actually have some currency in that trust piggy bank. So for the few times where we need to remove some currency, it's not going to be the end of the world. So in summary, by doing this, by creating that safe, predictable environment with choices and understanding, we create happy dogs, not spoiled dogs.
Click it